During that weekend family dinner, my stepmother looked me in the eyes and said, "Either you hand over your room to your little brother, or pack your things and leave." And I knew my own home had just been taken from me. The room fell silent except for the clink of my father's fork against the plate. I stared at the family photos on the wall, the memories they represented suddenly feeling like borrowed possessions. My brother avoided my gaze while my stepmother's expression held no regret. I felt the hurt settle deep, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of my tears. I stood, walked upstairs, packed my bags quietly, and left the place I had ever called home. 3 days later, from the window of my hillside house, I watched the sunrise and realized the silence they mistook for weakness had become the beginning of quiet revenge. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life, I had been the person everyone counted on, but no one truly noticed. After my mother passed away, my father remarried, and I tried harder than anyone to make our new family work. I helped around the house, handled responsibilities without being asked, and made sure my younger brother, Ethan, always had what he needed. At first, I believed patience could build a family. I ignored the small things, the way my opinions were dismissed at the dinner table, the way my achievements were treated like ordinary events, the way my room slowly became the only space where I felt I still belonged. My stepmother always saw me as the adaptable one, the child who would understand, forgive, and move aside. My father rarely challenged her decisions, choosing peace over fairness. They thought because I stayed quiet, I didn't feel anything. They never realized my silence was not acceptance. It was observation. For years, I watched, learned, and prepared. I knew exactly who stood beside me and who only valued me when I was useful. So when my stepmother gave me that ultimatum at dinner, she believed she was forcing me to lose. She didn't understand that she had finally given me the reason to stop, waiting for a place in their home and create one of my own. The first sign was not a cruel word. It was a look. A few months before that dinner, I noticed how my stepmother's eyes moved around the room whenever I spoke, as if she was waiting for me to finish instead of listening. During family conversations, my ideas disappeared into the air, but Ethan's smallest achievements were celebrated like major victories. One evening, I came home late from work and found my belongings neatly stacked outside my bedroom door. My stepmother smiled and said she was just making space because Ethan needed a bigger room for his hobbies. I carried everything back inside without an argument, even though I noticed the new gaming equipment already filling half his room. At dinner, my father would clear his throat whenever tension appeared, but he never looked directly at me. That silence became its own answer. Little by little, my room became smaller. My voice became quieter, and my place in the family became conditional. They didn't push me away all at once. They erased me slowly, believing I wouldn't notice. But I noticed everything. Every pause, every forced smile, every time I was expected to sacrifice something and pretend it didn't matter. And with every moment, I stopped hoping they would see my value. I started preparing for the day I would no longer need their approval. The night of the dinner was not when I lost my family. It was the night I finally stopped losing myself. After my stepmother gave me the ultimatum, I walked upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. The house was quiet, but I could hear their voices downstairs. They were already discussing where Ethan would put his things, already planning my absence as if I had never belonged there. That was the moment something inside me settled. I opened my laptop and looked at the plans I had been quietly building for years. The savings account they never knew about. The investments I had made carefully. The property listings I had studied during late nights when everyone assumed I was just working extra hours. I realized I had spent so much time proving I deserved a place in their home that I forgot I could build one without them. The next morning, I didn't argue. I didn't demand an apology. I didn't wait for someone to understand what they had done. I signed the papers. 3 days later, I stood on the wooden deck of my new house overlooking the hills, holding the keys in my hand. The view was peaceful, but the greatest feeling was knowing I had left without begging anyone to let me stay. For the first time in years, my future belonged completely to me. I didn't want revenge that came from anger. Anger fades. I wanted something permanent, a life they could never take away from me. For years, I had worked as a financial analyst, learning how money moved, how contracts worked, and how careful decisions created long-term security. While my family saw my quiet nature as weakness, I was building a foundation they knew nothing about. I reviewed every detail before I made my move. I checked my savings, finalized the mortgage, studied the property records, and made sure every document was handled correctly. There would be no rushed decisions, no emotional mistakes, no dramatic confrontation that could be turned against me. I also made one important choice. I wouldn't tell them about my success. Not yet. I wanted them to experience the reality of their decision without my explanation getting in the way. I removed my name from shared responsibilities, organized my belongings, and left behind only what was mine. No angry messages, no accusations, no final speech. The strongest statement I could make was my absence. As the days passed, I focused on furnishing my new home, improving my career, and creating a life built on respect rather than obligation. They expected me to return after the shock wore off. They never considered that I might actually move forward. 3 days after I left, I sat on my new deck with a cup of coffee in my hands, watching the morning fog slowly disappear between the hills. The house was quiet in a way I had never experienced before. No tension, no careful footsteps, no feeling that I had to earn my place. Then my phone started ringing. First, it was my father. I let it go. A few minutes later, another call came. Then a message. "Can we talk?" I stared at those words for a long time. Not because I was angry, but because I remembered all the times I had waited for those same words from him when I needed support. Over the next few days, reality began catching up with them. The extra responsibilities I had quietly handled were suddenly visible. The bills I had helped organize, the repairs I had arranged, the errands I completed without recognition. All the things that had made life easier for them were no longer happening. My stepmother finally understood that the person she pushed away was the one holding more together than she realized. When I eventually answered my father's call, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list every hurt. I simply said, "I hope Ethan enjoys the room." There was silence on the other end, because they finally understood. They hadn't removed me from their home. They had removed themselves from my life. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected, but silence has a way of revealing what noise hides. My father called more often. At first, his words were careful, almost rehearsed. He asked about my house, my work, my plans. But underneath every question was something he never said directly: regret. My stepmother stopped sending messages altogether. I heard through relatives that she had changed the way she spoke about me. The confident woman who once called me selfish now described me as independent. Was a small change in words, but it showed she finally understood the difference between someone leaving and someone choosing themselves. Some family members told me I had been too harsh. Others admitted they had noticed how often I was expected to sacrifice for everyone else. The truth was, I didn't need everyone to take my side. I had spent years searching for approval from people who only valued my presence when it benefited them. The greatest consequence wasn't that they missed me. It was that they had to live with the knowledge that they pushed away someone who would have stayed. And that was the lesson I carried forward. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the most weight. When they finally walk away, the emptiness they leave behind speaks louder than any argument ever could. Months later, I stood on the same hillside where I had once watched the sunrise for the first time. The house that began as an escape had become something much more, a place where I finally felt at peace. I learned that leaving was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I deserved better than being someone's backup plan. My relationship with my father changed slowly. We didn't return to the way things were, because some wounds don't disappear with a single apology. But we began having honest conversations, and for the first time, he listened without looking away. As for my stepmother, I stopped waiting for her regret to complete my healing. Her realization was her burden to carry, not mine. I built a life surrounded by people who valued my presence, not just my usefulness. I traveled, grew my career, and filled my home with memories that belonged completely to me. Looking back, I don't remember the anger from that dinner as clearly as I. Remember the calm afterward? The moment I walked out the door wasn't the end of my story. It was the first page of the life I had been quietly preparing for. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not watching someone lose what they had. It is becoming someone they can never hurt again.